Hello and welcome to this jazz guitar lesson. I'm Chris Whiteman and thanks for joining me. Today's lesson is part 2 of a 3-part series where we're looking at development of bebop vocabulary. In part 1, we went through the first 5 steps of a 7-step process for developing vocabulary. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I would suggest you start there, and I'll put a link to that video in this video's description. So a brief recap of the first 5 steps. 1 is identifying a phrase that you want to acquire. 2 would be transcribing that phrase. Part 3 is doing an analysis of the phrase against the harmony, and also looking at any rhythmic aspects to the phrase that are important. Step 4 is developing technical proficiency and reflexing the phrase so that we have muscle memory, we don't have to think about it. And step 5 was transposing that phrase in all 12 keys. There are 2 more steps that I like to do in this process. Step 6 is to take the original phrase and to start to build some variations. So I'm going to personalize the phrase and manipulate it and kind of make it my own. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to begin to manipulate phrases so that we can get more mileage out of a single phrase. And then step 7 we're going to do in part 3, and that's about looking for opportunities for application. So how do we take this vocabulary and then apply it to a song that we're playing? All right, so let's take this original phrase, and I'm just going to walk you through my process for creating variations. So the original phrase is a 2-5-1 phrase in the key of A flat major. So we have B flat minor 7, E flat 7, and A flat major 7. The line sounds like this. All right, so this is a 2-5-1 phrase. And one of the considerations is when you're dealing with a phrase that is moving through multiple harmonies is to be aware of what aspect of the line, do I need to retain, and what aspects of the line do I have some flexibility with manipulating so that I don't lose the integrity of the line. So a good 2-5-1 line, even if you don't have harmonic support underneath you, nobody's comping for you, you should still be able to hear the chords changing. Now, the reason you can hear the harmony changing as I play through the line is because of specific tones and voice leading that are happening in the line. And so I want to identify that first so that I understand those aspects before I begin manipulating the line. Now, basic voice leading in jazz is most often going to be built around the thirds and the sevenths. So if we look at this line, it starts on the 11th, goes into the 3rd, right? There's my B flat minor 7, down to the 5th. Here's my flat 7th, right? So I just mentioned 3rds and 7ths are going to be an important part, right? There's my 3rd, flat 7th, 9, root, down to the 5th, back to the flat 7. Now, this flat 7 is more important than the previous flat 7 because this is the last 8th note in the measure of B flat minor 7. And the next note is going to be the downbeat of the next measure, and this is the 3rd of E flat 7, right? So that flat 7 moving to the 3rd of E flat 7 is really letting the listener know that the harmony has changed at that point, right? And then everything after this point is now about the E flat dominant chord. 3rd, 5th, flat 7, back to the 5th. Now we go up and we target the altered nines. So we're creating some tension on the dominant. Flat 9, sharp 9, flat 9, root, back to the flat 7. And just like the first measure, this is the flat 7 that's really important, more so than the first one that showed up at the beginning of the measure, because this is the one that's part of the voice leading into the next harmony, right? So we have the D flat is the flat 7 on the E flat dominant, and it's going to move down a half step into the C, which is the third of the tonic, the A flat major. That's our destination, right? So if I extract just the thirds and the sevenths, we get this. That's really the structural foundation for this line. So let's look at it in relation to the chords. I'll harmonize it. So I play a B flat minor 7, third, 7th, move to an E flat. So I have my root in my third, then I bring my flat 7 and resolve to A flat major 7. Right? So a very simple 2-5-1. So when I'm playing, I see those kind of pillars, right? Support pillars, the thirds and the sevenths. And that helps me, organize the line, and it helps my retention of the line as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take each harmony and kind of isolate the section of the line for that particular harmony. So we're going to start with B flat minor 7, and we're going to do 4 variations of the first measure of this line. And we are going to use kind of the vernacular of bebop. We're going to use bebop elements to manipulate, embellish, create variations, personalize these lines. Those elements are going to be chromaticism, enclosures, and some rhythmic variety, particularly triplets, which are a very strong rhythmic figure and quite common in bebop. All right, so here is our first variation on the B flat minor 7 line. All right, so I changed one note. The original, from here, it dropped down a 4th and then went up to the flat 7 into the 3rd. So instead of dropping down the 4th, I just moved chromatically all the way down and voice led into the 3rd of E flat 7 that way. And now we have straight chromaticism from the root of the B flat minor to the flat 7th and then into the 3rd of E flat 7. All right, so let's look at another variation where we use an enclosure. So I kept the beginning of the line the same. Now I went down a whole step. I have another 8th note before I can land on the G for the E flat 7. So what do? I go below my target and then slide up. Right? So that's an enclosure. So the normal voice leading would be the A flat moving to the G. Here, I did a little bit of deception. I went below it and then into the G. Now this is still considered voice leading. An enclosure is still voice leading. Right? Because I start here and I end up here. I just added another step in there. And that line, again, sounds like this. And, with the first example and this example, I could keep everything else the same, and I could play the rest of the line just as it was originally. with the chromaticism. All right, so that's two variations on the B flat minor. Let's do a couple more. So this line is going to have two pieces of chromaticism as well as some rhythmic variety. I'm going to start with a triplet. Sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. So instead of starting like the original line, which starts with a whole step, I blew chromatically. But in order to keep everything falling in the right place rhythmically, since I added a note, I'm compressing the rhythm into a triplet. So I get, right, triplet, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right. And again, I could leave the rest of the line as is. All right, so that one, two pieces of chromaticism as well as adding a new rhythm, a triplet. All right. So let's look at the fourth example for B flat minor 7. And this is going to be the triplet with the chromaticism followed by an enclosure that we already did. So we're combining from the earlier phrase. And that's going to sound like this. 3, 4. So started with my chromatic triplet, and then I'm doing my enclosure of the third. And then I played the rest of the line as it was originally. All right, so those are 4 variations for the B flat minor 7. Now we're going to move on to the E flat 7 and look at some variations there. So the original line starts on the 3rd, moves up to the 5th, to the flat 7th, back to the 5th, and then we target the 9s, the altered 9s. Flat 9, sharp 9, flat 9, to the root, to the flat 7th, into the 3rd, right, of A flat major. So here's the variation. It's just going to have one note difference. So what did I do there? I just kept the first 3 notes the same, and then instead of doubling back to the 5th, I moved up to the root, and this is going to really lead me into the flat 9. So and if you put it in time, 2, 3, 4. So really simple, not much difference there, but it does keep the line moving in one direction all the way up to the sharp 9. And then I change direction, come down into the resolution there. All right, so for the next phrase, I am going to add a triplet, some chromaticism, and change one of the original rhythms. And that's going to sound like this. 2, 3, 4. So I started that with a triplet and chromaticism. So instead of, I went triplet 2, and I made my way up to the flat 9. And instead of a triplet here, I'm going to do an 8th note followed by 2 16ths. So it's a slight variation. So instead of, it's put the whole line together, sounds like this. 2, 3, 4. All right, so for the third variation on the E flat 7, we are going to retain the first triplet with the chromaticism from the previous example and add another triplet on B2. And it's going to sound like this. 2, 3, 4. So now we have 3 triplets followed by 2 eighth notes. And one more time. 2, 3, 4. All right, and so for the fourth example on the E flat 7, I'm going to add one more triplet. So we're going to have 4 triplets. So the entire measure is going to be triplets, but the last triplet is going to end up being an enclosure of our resolution. So we're going to enclose the note C on the A flat major 7, and that whole line is going to sound like this: 2, 3, 4. And one more time: 2, 3, 4. All right, so those are 4 variations on the E flat 7 content. So for the content on the A flat major 7, there isn't much, right? We're resolved to the 3rd of A flat major 7, and we just stopped and let it rest there. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually add some content so we can extend the line through the resolution. And we're going to look at some really simple kind of ideas on an A flat major 7. All right, so the first phrase for A flat major 7 sounds like this: 2, 3, 4. Right, so that's a phrase that works over a major 7 chord. Went 3, 5, 6, major 7. I slid into it, and then to the 3rd, to the 5th. Now I'm going to take that same phrase. I'm going to start on the same pitch I started on the 3rd, but then I'm going to displace the rest of the phrase down an octave. So instead of moving up, I'm going to move down. All right, so 3, 5, 6, 7, 3, 5, and that's that phrase. Now in the 3rd phrase, I'm going to add a triplet and some chromaticism. That's going to sound like this: 2, 3, 4. So kind of simple. 2, 3, 4, 1, and triplet. In the 4th phrase, it's just going to be straight chromaticism between the 3rd and the 5th, which is, kind of like Blue Monk, right? I'm going to start on the C, move up to C sharp, to D, to E flat, right? So 1 and 2 and. Now, here's the cool thing. If we have 4 phrases for each harmony, right? So that is 12 different phrases. But we can take one phrase from each section and string them together, and we end up with 64 permutations. So you'll have 64 variations of this 2-5-1 phrase. So what I recommend is going through, picking, a phrase from the B flat minor, and then you can pair it with any of the phrases from the E flat 7 and any of the phrases of the A flat major 7. And so I'm going to pick 3 now and just give you an example. This is actually what I played at the intro of the video, and it sounds like this: 2, 3, 4. And like I said, that is one of 64 possible permutations. All right, and in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to work on applying some of this content into a standard. I'm probably going to do Stella by Starlight so that we can really start to develop some fluency with implementing this stuff. So thanks so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful just to kind of see how I think about it. Obviously, this is not the only way to build vocabulary. It's just the method that I found works really well for me. Hopefully it's useful for you. Everything we went over today is available as a PDF download to my Patreon subscribers, and that PDF has tablature and standard notation. And I'll put a link in the video description if you're interested in signing up for that. And I will see you next time. Thanks again.